Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anthony Frangiotis of the Drawing Room, and welcome to our virtual art demo with Corrinn. We've had some technical difficulties this afternoon, so Corrinn has actually joined me in the drawing room. Hi, Corrinn. And we find ourselves in two completely different rooms, so that we can socially distance. Hi, Liz. Nice to see you.
Hi, Liz. Hello. I was just at a cousin's virtual wedding, so I'm logging in very late. I just wanted to say hello. I'll be mostly behind the scenes. So looking forward.
Thanks for joining us. I sent you some photos that we'd like to share as well. So
absolutely, I'll get those.
That would be great.
Great.
Thanks so much. So, Corrinn, first things first, you have to tell me how to properly pronounce your last name.
Oh, it's Jusell.
Jusell. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, it's a funny one.
I want to say Jusell or Jusell.
Yeah, that's what most people say.
Yeah. I'm glad you could be here today. For those of you who have not met Corrinn before, Corrinn is a potter, and she typically works out of Hatch Street Studios here in New Bedford. We did a little bit of a practice run through earlier this week, and we were having some technical difficulties. So she was kind enough to bring her wares and do her demo here. So you mostly work in porcelain, is that correct?
Yes.
So I know in terms of the demo itself, you have a couple things with you, and I have some of your finished pieces here behind me. Those are also available on our online shop and in the drawing room. So if you could maybe start with telling us what you have with you today.
Sure. What I have with me is a bowl that I'm going to make into a berry bowl. And I make a berry bowl blank, essentially, before I cut it up and carve holes in it. I make it a little bit taller because I cut the rim down and I want it to still be a nice height. I'll come a little closer and show you. This will be the finished product. Got a berry bowl here. It's got a nice little handle you can hold your thumb on. Just cradle it in your hand. It's kind of nice. It's got the holes and then the bare porcelain buffed on the outside. I use a diamond pad sander to do that. So it's got diamond grit on it, which is really very helpful because it cuts through the silica of the clay. And a little saucer just to catch any extra water that comes off the bowl. Because I don't know about you, but I don't like to put a berry bowl on my table and then have it be wet. That's just gross. So, Anthony, do you want me to start the demo now?
That would be great, actually, and I'll ask you questions as we go along.
Sure.
And I'll try to keep my eye on the comments as well in case somebody else has questions.
Sure, that would be great.
Okay.
So I brought a saucer that I'm also going to cut. Do you feel like we're at a good viewing point? Need to come any closer? It's good. Okay. All right. So my main tool here is an X-Acto knife. It's my favorite tool in the world. I go through many blades, but this is all I use mostly. I use and 3 drill bits. They're all varying in size by a very small amount. And other than that, I will sometimes use a metal rib. It's made of stainless steel, but it's pretty flexible. It's a great tool for when I'm working and throwing, but it also is very nice for smoothing out work. And for me, I focus on a hyper smooth surface, and that they're wheel thrown, it poses some issues. So I'm just going to move this aside. All right. So what I do to start is I put my bowl somewhat in the center of the banding wheel. This is my banding wheel. And what I do is make one initial cut that goes all the way around And it's just cutting down about a ½ inch around most of the rim so that I can start to define the handle. So I just remove this, put it off to the side, and you'll notice I've just got a little bit of an outcropping here.
How long has the clay been sitting that you're able to do this? Because I'm assuming if it's very wet, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, it can't be too wet. It is pretty dry. It's what we would call a leather hard dryness. So think about like a leather belt and how flexible that is. It's about that same. Flexibility. And after I threw it yesterday, I let it dry a little bit, but it's pretty thin to start with, so it doesn't take very long to dry. It's maybe a ¼ inch in thickness. And then I trimmed it this morning. So the bottom's actually still a little wetter than the top, which may present a small issue when drilling the holes. The clay might be a little sticky, but I think other than that, it should be fine. So my next move here is I cut 2 scoops out of each side to define the little swoosh that we've got here so that we get a nice undulation of the rim.
Corrinn, do all of your pieces have the same swoosh, or are they all cut the same across the top?
Yeah. Yeah, more or less. That's how I cut about everything. Sometimes it varies depending on the piece, but more or less it gets the same sort of initial cut. So right now I've got like the very basic of that. Now what I'm going to do is go in and really define that out. And I like to get down to eye level with the rim so I can really focus on having a nice continuous curve. And this is where I'm going to start coming up into the handle and carving over that rim.
So one of the things that I love about that rim that you're cutting now, and here's a close up for everyone who's watching, this is a finished piece of Corinn's that we have, is that it reminds me of a water's edge. And I don't know if that's something that inspired you or sort of just a subtle wave to it.
For sure, something that inspired me. Yeah, I mean, a lot of my based and the effects that the ocean has on the land. Moreover, my wall pieces are about. Liz, I don't know if you can flash a little picture of the wall piece I've been working on, but that is mostly revolved around when the tide comes in and out, it leaves ridges in the sand where the tide ebbs and flowed over the ocean. I mean, over the sand. But I try to take that and then put it back into this. Yeah, just like those.
So this is a smaller piece while we're dealing with our, there we are.
Oh, there we go. So that's a side view of the most recent piece I've been working on. I just came up with that one in the last 3 weeks probably, and just hung it actually last week. But it's coming down so that it can go to its permanent home.
So I'm familiar with your work that is wall hung like this, but for those who may be watching who aren't familiar with it, could you explain a little bit about, obviously this image, I know this image is a progress image.
Yes, progress shot. So on the back, that brown paper. What was that, Anthony? I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was just asking you to talk a little bit about how each of the wall pieces are hung.
Oh, I mean, they're physical hanging. I'll show you. I even brought a little piece here. This is one of them. I call them slugs, oddly enough. It was more of just a joke when I was in school, and it kind of stuck. But on the back, they're all slip cast. So I pour liquid clay into a plaster mold, and the plaster mold kind of acts like it sucks the water out of the clay and creates kind of a candy shell. I always talk about it as like a chocolate bunny. You know how they're hollow and just the shell of something, but someone poured all the chocolate in there and swished it around the mold. That's basically what happens with these. I know it's the best analogy I can come up with for it. But these two holes on the back I pre-mark, and each one is done the same, so that for each shape and size, because they come in many shapes and sizes, they all have the same holes. So each time I go to hang that particular piece, I can mark it out pretty easily. And they just slide right onto a couple of picture hanging nails. And they're super lightweight. Like this piece might be 1/4 pound.
So when you're doing a custom commission like this, do you include installation in your pricing?
I do, yeah, because it tends to just be easier, but I do factor it out if you have someone else professionally coming in to hang it, or if it's not an accessible location for me. Because at that point, then there would be more costs of travel fees and trying to get there. So it's a whole nother issue.
So we actually do have a question from our friend Laurie about your bowls. So she's
Sure.
asking whether or not the bowls are microwave safe.
Yeah, you can put them in. I mean, if you leave it in there for like 4 minutes, it's gonna get a little warm, but a minute or two, maybe 3 is fine. That's how I judge it anyhow. I use them in my own kitchen, and I put them in the microwave, that's for sure, because I don't have a real kitchen. But yes, for sure. And dishwasher safe, definitely. It's funny, I get that question a lot. A lot of people think automatically, you can't, it's got to be, oh, wow, that's another one. That one is actually an older installation that I did. I did that one my last semester in school. That was when I first kind of thought of the whole tides on the wall. And it's really expanded from that first one. And that's where I then figured out the templates and a lot of the basics of it. And I've gone back and refined it from that point. But that's an original. I like that one. I think that was yeah.
I like the fact that you started out by calling them slugs, because to me they, in addition to slugs, they also remind me of barnacles. And I think I mentioned to you there was another potter whose work I admired many years ago, and I kicked myself for not having bought a piece. But it was very similar to this, where they were individually wall hung, and they were a little bit more like barnacles. So these resonate.
I like that
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're super funky. It was just a joke in school. Like one of my friends came over and she was like, "What are you doing, making slugs?" I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." And it just stuck.
So I don't want to. We've been jumping around with the berry bowl. So is the rim cut now on that?
Yeah. So what I've done so far is I've gotten the basic shape of the rim. What I'm going to do now, though, is I go in and I bevel the rim. So I'll show you. I'll give you a little quick close up. So here we are. It's flat. Got a flat cut, and we're going to make our way over to a beveled edge.
In terms of the edge being beveled, is there a technical importance to that, or is that an aesthetic choice?
Super aesthetic choice. I don't know if there's anything. It doesn't need to be beveled. I personally just like the aesthetic look of it, so that when I glaze the interior, it's a really perfect breaking point for it to be porcelain on the outside and glazed on the inside. And that's partly for functionality, but porcelain is a really cool clay body where if it is fired to its peak temperature, it's completely food safe just on its own, because it becomes almost glass-like. Because porcelain's composed of about half clay and half glass. It's cool.
I didn't know that. I learned that today. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm a clay nerd. Sorry.
We like clay nerds.
All right, so now what I'm doing is I just had like a little corner there that I didn't quite like. So I just took that down. But what I'm going to do now is bevel the rim. And then I am going to plot out my handle. And I do the rim and the handle and get them to a pretty refined point before I start drilling holes. Because if it's going to break, it's probably going to break when I do the handle.
In your studio, do you have a collection of broken misfits?
Oh, no, they die by hammer.
Well,
Oh, yeah,
we know how you get through your
misfits.
handle your stress.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I know that the studio space that you have at Hatch now, you actually share with another individual. So,
I actually share it with 2 other men normally, and then right now, due to COVID, we had a 4th that we took in, a foster child, some may say.
oh wow, I thought you were going to say the opposite, that you had
No.
less. You actually took in more.
Yeah, we took in 1 more. He hides away most of the time, so we feel okay about it.
So at your studio space, are you full production? Meaning, are you going from start to finish with each piece in your studio space, or are you firing someplace else? Or walk us through that.
Oh no, I fire in my studio. I had sent, maybe we've got a couple of pictures we could throw up on what the studio looks like. So I've got my own studio space. So it's a large space. It's about a 2,000 square foot space that I share with Jim Lawton, who's the tenured professor over at UMass, and Dave Katz, who has taught kind of all over the place. He taught at RISD for a bit, Roger Williams, and CCRI. So, and then we've taken in Adam Spurrier, who is a Brooklyn artist 99% of the time, but right now he's hiding out here because we all know the state of the world. It's a little frightening. But yeah. And so we all split it up pretty evenly. I have like 400 and the guys have the rest of the space, but we've got kilns and we all share our kilns, and that's really nice because being someone who's a emerging artist per se, young and new to the world, it's like equipment's expensive, so it's nice to have a couple that have more equipment.
It's expensive in terms of the equipment itself, but it's also expensive to run, because I'm assuming is your gas bill separated there, or is it a gas bill?
We have electric kilns.
Okay.
Electric kilns. They're about as safe as your oven at home.
Oh, wow.
Very nice. Yeah. They can be expensive to fire. Not wildly, though. I mean, it's probably to fire like a glazed kiln is probably about $25 for firing. And factor you've got, 60 pieces in there, it works out. Firing costs are not exorbitant as long as you learn to pack your kiln well. Yeah. So those are the 2 kilns that we have functioning right now, and we've got a couple others that are about to be set up, which is nice. So we'll have one in about every size, which we don't need, but have. Can we roll the photos over so we can see other shots of the studio? Yeah, okay. So that's more of my space. My space goes all the way meets the wall. All right, so that's another shot where you can see more of like my back corner. And this is, I've got one wheel that you can see in the corner pretty well. And then I have another one just a little further past it that is standing. So I actually stand and sit to throw. I like that it moves your body. So you're not constantly sitting, but standing is much better for your back. But I also work as a production potter for a designer in Boston. And that actually more obligates me to sit and throw because a lot of those pieces are pretty large. Yeah, so this is a great shot right here of my throwing stations. And you'll notice I even have a gigantic fatigue mat to stand on in front of my standing wheel, which I love. It was probably the best Christmas gift I got. Yep, that one. And yeah, and then I've got a wedge block next to it that I prep all of my clay on. But yeah, so that's my studio. It's beautiful space, Hatch Street Studios. We've got like 65 plus artists there. It's really, really nice to have such a community. Back to the demo, we've got, so I've beveled the edge. So I'll just give you a quick closer look. So now it's really angled off and it flows right down in to the bowl. Now what I'm going to do is plot out my handle. So what I do is cut right into the wall of clay, which you can see here. And what I do is plot it from the interior. So I just like to give myself a nice, probably 3/4 of an inch to a 1/2 inch of space from the rim so that I'm not likely to break the handle, because that's a bummer. It does happen, but it's no fun when it does. And now, real quick, before I move on to actually cutting the handle, I'm just going to take a rib and clean up the edge, because to have it as finished as possible is best before I move on. Okay, so now that's all cleaned up and nice and smooth, so I won't have to work too hard later, because there are a number of steps to my working process. So right now it's not really dry, but it's drier. And once it's dried out, I will actually leave this out to dry for probably a couple days before I fire it for the first time. And there are 2 firings that each piece will go through. There's a bisque firing, which is your first and initial firing that, what? Oh, hi. We've got some friends in here. So bisque firing is the first firing, and what that does is solid up the piece so that you can glaze it without it disintegrating, because when you wet dry clay, it will turn back into a pile of mud, which is very helpful. So what I just did here while I was talking, I cut through the interior, and you'll notice it's a real rough cut. Nothing beautiful at this point. Oop, there we go, finding the camera. And what I'm going to do now is go back in and refine it and just get a better idea of what I'm looking at. Want to curve it out, make sure I have a nice continuous curve here. And I also try to make sure that it's lining up with the handle so that they have a similar thickness going throughout. And not only is it aesthetically pleasing, but it will help it when drying so that it doesn't crack. Thanks. So I'm making this variable. Yeah, and we'll cut some holes in there too. Thank you. And again, I'm getting down to the eye level to cut the rim so that I can really see what I'm doing.
So Corrinn, is there a trick to
Yeah.
spacing where you have to put the handle so it's solid enough and it's still aesthetically pleasing?
You know what? That's kind of the fun thing about porcelain is that I don't. So with porcelain, because it's such a strong clay body, because it's almost glass, because it's composed of about half glass, it's quite strong. So you'll notice it's still quite thin here, but I do go with the way of ergonomics and trying to place it so that it's comfortable in your hand. So making sure that it fits right in the palm and the curve fits well here. And then you can just kind of tuck a thumb in there or hold a couple fingers right on there.
I love that.
Do that.
I love that it's ergonomically functional as well as beautiful. So
I always think about ergonomics. I find it very interesting, the study of it.
Yeah.
So back to beveling, what I'm going to do is just bevel the handle, which gets a little funky so that I don't break it, but so that it looks like it fits with the rest of the form. And often I hold it in my hand and anchor myself onto the bowl with just my pinky. But as you can imagine from getting so close up to this bowl, after a while, I get to be a little cross-eyed. It's pretty entertaining. Get to the end of it, I'm like, oh, well, those look good. Like, those are some nice lines. It's fine, though. It's fine. You'll notice I still go back and change lines after the fact. It's a more of a dirty habit of mine, which then causes things to take longer. But I think it's important because if you don't go back and fix it now, then it just lives forever. Because ceramics, they don't die unless you smash them. So
I know, as we heard, you like the hammer method.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, and this is something that's happened to me a few times. If you put something in the garbage whole, somebody's going to take it out of the garbage. Yeah. Oh, it's a good one. And then you see it someplace too, because it's usually somebody in your building that takes it out of the garbage. This happened to me when I was in school. It's happened to me in my art studio.
Interesting.
But you go around and you find pieces. It's like, I definitely threw that out.
Yeah.
Definitely threw that out.
You're like, I'm pretty sure I didn't have a second sale and include that one because I wanted it to not exist anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, I do second sales. Don't get me wrong. I'm a fan of a second sale, but there's a line of what is worthy and is not. All right. So my handle's looking pretty well beveled at this point. It's a little tricky, and so I got sidetracked again. Sorry, I'm so all over the place, but we're getting there as a group. We'll get there. There are many processes that I do to each piece. So as it dries more after a couple of days, I actually go in with a Scotch-Brite pad, very basic Scotch-Brite pad, and I sand it so that it gets to be a hyper smooth surface, and I have no funky grooves in it. I have no funny lines. Everything is nice and smooth and very smooth. Very smooth. Sorry, I have no better word for that.
No, smooth is a good word. Do you find some parts of the process more cathartic or meditative than others?
Oh yeah, 100%. I actually really enjoy cutting the rims. I have been known to just sit like this and cut rims just continually. So like I prep out, a number of pieces,
Sure.
whether they're vases, bowls, berry bowls, whatever, mugs, and I will just go one and then the next and keep going. And I'll do that for a couple hours until, as I said, cross-eyed, and I'm like, I can't see anything anymore. I need to stop.
That's fair. Well, even just watching you do this one bowl, even though we're distracting you with questions.
Oh, that's okay. I
you're-
teach. This is regular.
because you're still so focused on what you're doing, and are just very it just seems like a very calm and soothing place to be. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, no, it's good. This is one of my favorite processes about it. I do enjoy throwing the piece itself though, but that's a little more mindless, to be honest. Because at this point I've been doing ceramics for probably 11 years. And I go in and I center my clay and I throw it. And once I have the item in my head, I have measurements for everything. And I refer back to my measurements, take my ruler, check it. I check my height, the width of my rim. And I have a general concept of what the curve is on everything, because my curve stays pretty regular throughout everything. But yeah, it's a little more mindless, but also very meditative. Just the process of wheel throwing is really meditative. I highly recommend it to anyone that's thinking about it. It's a great hobby to take up, or a profession. Okay, so we're ready for our next step. So we've got a handle, we've got the rim. They're both fairly smooth, not ideal yet, but they get there. My next move that I do is I actually go and plot out where I'm going to put the holes for draining. And I'll show you on this one. They are actually centered off center, but semicircular. So they actually swoop up onto this side because I have the handle over here. I like to balance it out with the holes on the interior. There we go. It's kind of a better image. And I always try to make sure that I have one or two there in the bottom so that they drain well. Because I have found berry bowls that only drain on the sides, and then you get a pool in the bottom. And then your raspberries are just kind of soggy.
I believe I once owned a berry bowl just like that. I didn't realize what the flaw was until just now.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a funny concept to think of, but you don't really realize it until you start making things. I made this mistake a couple times before, and I was like, oh no, this is not good. Can't use that. You can, but then you get soggy raspberries, which is not good either.
So yeah, but that's why everything is a process, right? You make, you learn, you break the hammer, you make.
But there's so many additions of everything. You learn, so much learning. You learn with everything. Okay, so our next move is I've got 3 different size drill bits that I will use to drill the holes. I start with the thicker ones on the inside, and then I work out to smaller holes on the outside. What I do is I've got this funny little, it was once a paintbrush, I believe, and I put both ends in a pencil sharpener, and it's my favorite tool in the world.
That's a pretty awesome tool.
Yeah, it's pretty great. I think it was just like a paintbrush that totally got so soggy that all of the varnish came off. And so perfect for it. All right, so what I do is I take it on the inside and I just draw my circles, and I usually start just off of the center for my first. And then I go about an inch out from that first circle that I drew and draw another one. And then I do the same thing for the third. And I think you are able to see it. Yeah, so you can see it a little bit there.
Yep, we can see them.
And then I go in with my drill bits. So I start with the thickest one, which is it's 9 30-second. I don't know. I got a big set of them at Harbor Freight. Best shopping store. Love it. So I start with the bottom one right in the center. And you'll notice with each one, there's a little bit of a blowback that happens from the drill. And I leave those because if you try to get them off now, burrs is what they're called, burrs. But if you leave the burr, if you try to get rid of it now, it's just going to make more of a mess and close off the hole or make it look funny. So I leave it until later on when I get to my sanding process with the Scotch-Brite pad and just sand it off later because it'll just flake right off instead of right now when I'd have to fight with it, which is not worth it.
So when you first pulled out the drill bits, I thought you were going to pull out a power tool as well. So I'm glad it's still part of the whole more quiet meditative process.
Yeah, okay, so it's kind of funny. I do know people that use an actual drill to do this, but you can't have something so thin and delicate and then use a power tool on it. That's too much power.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it was just funny when you first mentioning drill bits, I thought, well, I don't know what I'm doing. Obviously, Corrinn knows what he's talking about. And then when I saw you twisting it by hand, I went, oh, okay, now it makes much more sense.
And it's, it's much easier than if I tried to pull out a drill and then the drill doesn't fit on the inside, so then you have to plot it on the outside, and then it gets funny looking. It's just not worth it. And you think it might be more efficient. It's not. And I always try to have my hand behind it on the other side so you get a little bit less of a burr. But, I mean, this guy's still a little bit wet. So we've got a few burrs. But it's not bad. Those will flake right off later. So that's the first round. Done. And it's just 6 holes. And it'll continue to be 6 going around. I just switch it out with 1 in between each. I just alternate. So medium 1. And just following right along my my circle here.
And now that you've taught us about, where the holes should be, I'm never going to look at a berry bowl the same. I'm empowered with the knowledge that you've given us about how we should be holding it, where the water should be flowing, because no one wants soggy raspberries.
No, that's the worst. That's what I'm saying. And I mean, I say raspberries because I'm a big fan of raspberries, but I mean grapes, blueberries, whatever floats your boat. Blackberries. I mean, come on.
You don't want any.
Everybody needs a berry bowl. Yeah. No soggy.
I know now that I'm watching you make this, I'm thinking my cousins who just got married an hour ago and whose virtual
the one you're at the wedding for?
Whose virtual wedding I was attending. I'm thinking they might be getting a berry bowl.
Very nice. I like that idea. All right, and then we've got round 2. Oh, wait, gotta find the camera. It's kind of funky. But got the outside. And you'll notice I've got 3 that go through it, but because of the foot that I trim on these, they're very, very minimal, but just enough that it lifts it up. So it's nice to have one right on the edge there, which I do. Doesn't always work out that way, but it's nice when it does. And then the last round. And I just need to clean this off. So I always keep a little stainless steel metal brush, which is unfortunate because it makes a little bit of dust and Clay dust is not great for you, but this is rare occasion when I don't have it with water, which is fine. It's all good. And notice most of the time I hold it in my hand, and that's just for my own like security of it. But that's also how you can tell the ergonomics of it. It's got a nice weight to it, so it just rests in the hand. It doesn't fall out. It's not top heavy or side heavy or anything.
I think that's perfect because, you know, like so many things that you have in the kitchen, you actually want to use them, not just stare at them.
Mm-hmm. That's how I feel about it. I can safely say I'm not someone that will often buy something that I can't use. And I mean, most ceramics, that is a qualifying factor for me. And I mean, I know there are people who make them and they're not actually intended for function, which is not a bad thing. It's a thing. Not a thing I'm interested in. As a consumer, anyhow. I get it as a maker, but as a consumer, which is where you have to think, more or less, as a maker. You want to think as a consumer, because what are you going to buy? Because that's probably what other people will buy. If you want to sell work. But I mean, if you don't want to sell work, that's cool too.
Corrinn, I'm happy to report that we sold 2 of your bowls during your demo.
Oh! Cool. That's always fun.
Right here.
That's
Sorry?
I said we must be doing something right.
Well, that's wonderful. You're literally in the drawing room doing a demo, and bowls are being sold right next to you.
I love it.
That's great.
You know, it's kind of funny. Demos, they sell work. Some of my most loyal customers are students. Because they see it and then they can have a better understanding of what you're making and what you put into it.
Mm-hmm.
And the time and energy that it takes and the skill level that it takes, and you get a better appreciation for what you're buying.
You get to understand the why and the how, and something that Anthony and I talk about all the time is, when you have something and you bring it into your home, you like to be able to tell the story about it.
Yeah,
so it's
for sure.
Like, I have this awesome berry bowl made by this super cool girl who is doing a demo, and I walked into the shop while she was doing a live demo on the internet, and I bought 2 berry bowls.
Yeah, that's a cool story.
So, Anthony, do you have more of Corrinn's stuff with you?
I do. So I have.
But I mean, that's exactly go some.
So I have, I know we talked about bowls and we talked about wall pieces, but this is also one of Corrinn's vases. This happens to be a lavender glaze on the inside, and again has that beveled edge that she was talking about earlier. So this stands about.
I'd love to throw in a cool fact about that vase.
Go for it. We want a vase fact. Oh.
Are we on? I'm sorry. It lagged.
Yeah, go ahead. I think you wanted to share a fun fact about the vase.
Oh, yeah. So the glaze on the inside of that on the inside of the vase is made with a rare earth element called neodymium, and the color of that glaze will actually shift colors, visibly shift colors between light sources. So in a fluorescent light, it is a like light ice blue, and in sunlight or daylight casting lights, then it's the lavender color.
Oh, that's lovely.
That's all I got for a fun fact.
That's a great fun fact.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. All right, so this berry bowl is about finished for this step. I have done my rough carving of the interior holes. And my next move will be, once this is dried out more, I'll go back in with the Scotch-Brite and just go over the surface on the outside and inside and get the rim nice and smooth. And so that'll happen in a couple days. And so in the meantime, it sits there. Give you that view there. And I also brought the saucer, so I'll cut one of these as well. And this is just basic on how I cut the rim, very similar. This is actually maybe a little bit drier, so it'll be a little entertaining to cut. And I tend to bring these over to the edge so that I can get the right angle on my hand so that I'm not fighting the banding wheel that I'm working on. But I do the same thing, and I go around the edge. And on a plate, I tend to cut maybe the top 1/4 inch, especially for a plate this size. Maybe a bigger plate, not. And also note that I cut towards myself, which is highly frowned upon. You should not do. Not advised for home use, but it happens. It's fine. I've got lots of little scars from X-Acto knives.
So one of the things I've been really excited about and telling customers is that you also make made-to-order table settings.
I do, yes.
So could you tell us a little bit about that and how that works?
So the made-to-order table settings, a lot of the reason that I do them made-to-order is because plates take up a lot of clay, and they take up a lot of kiln space because they are surface hogs. But I really enjoy making place settings, but for how often they're bought, I don't often keep them in stock. So they're usually made to order, and you pick your color, how many settings you want, and I do a price on, you could do just, if you want 4 dinner plates, we could do that, and I actually tend to take a percentage off and make it a grouping price for large dinner plates or lunch plates. But when you do a full setting, I want to say it's 94. Don't quote me. I'm terrible at remembering my own prices. That's why I write them all down. But I'll do a dinner plate, lunch plate, and a bowl, and you choose the color. And right now I've got quite a color selection, because what I did this winter was worked on all of my colors and my glazes. So I've got lots of colors. And it takes about 8 to 10 weeks for them to be complete, because I also work full-time on top of making my own work. Well, I work 30 hours and I teach, so it's kind of full-time.
So for anybody who's
That's
thinking
why it's
about
8 to 10 weeks.
So for anybody who's thinking about potential wedding gifts, there's some pre-planning that we need to work into.
I'm sorry, one more time?
I was just talking about pre-planning for wedding gifting. For the made
And
to order
I can
place.
ship it directly to them as well.
That's great. So I enjoyed watching your color process this winter. We follow you on Instagram, and some of the glazes you were testing looked quite great. Did you end up finalizing a collection, or how do you work on the glazes?
More or less. I'm still actively playing with some more glaze colors, but right now I've got a collection of maybe 15 to 20 colors that I've decided I'm going to keep as active options. And a couple of them are just variants on how much of the colorant is in the glaze. So it's easy to adjust and have ready, which is nice for me anyhow. A cost concept, because I make my own glazes in my studio, which is not overly common, but it's common enough.
So talk to us a little bit about making glazes. Do you start with a base? You can nerd out here as much as you want.
So glazes are funky. Yeah. When I was in college, I took a semester worth of just glaze chemistry, where we played with glazes, understood their melting point, and will melt at different temperatures. Really love to find this glaze base, not even the blue color in it, just the clear base, took a bit of work. And once I had it, that I've stuck with it ever since. And it's what we call a cone 6 glaze. So my finished wares go up to 2280 temperature wise Fahrenheit, which is a pyrometric cone 6. And then there's colorants. So that's on top of the base glaze that you have. And you can have colorants that exist from like copper. So like this is colored by a very small portion of copper carbonate, and that shifts at this nice aqua blue. And I mean, that's the same thing with that purple glaze. It's neodymium that's added to it, which is a rare earth element. And like cobalt is literally cobalt blue, and stains as well. So stains are another situation where they're a pre-fired material that is a color that will always come out that same color, versus copper, where it is a natural element that comes out of the earth and can vary a little bit based on where it's mined.
So you're in the process now at your studio of a firing, is that correct? Or soon to be a firing?
Yes, because you got a nice big large bowl in there. Yep, that is waiting to be fired. I should be running a bisque tomorrow. I don't know if that will be in that bisque, but I also have another one running on Tuesday. Because I also work as a production potter out of my own studio for a designer in Boston, I'm constantly firing. I run maybe 2, sometimes 3 firings a week. And all I do for them is the first firings, so a bisque, and I just bring those fired pots to them, and then they do all of the painting and glazing and whatnot.
So you're their production potter.
I am, yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, I like it.
So this is the
in the
aqua
field, and I
glaze.
don't need a waitress. Yep, that one. You have a much better light in there for the glaze, yeah. And all of my glazes pool down at the bottom, which I personally like. But
Yeah, that's a little bit delicious.
yeah, kind of, right?
Yeah. I think I had seen your work in 2 different places. I had seen your work up at Hatch Street when we were when you were doing open studios, and hopefully
Open
those
studios,
will be back soon, given our current circumstances. And the other place I saw your work,
figuring that out right now.
yeah,
And
is
where?
that I know you were at the New Bedford Art Museum as well at their holiday shop.
Yeah.
So
It
it's been really nice.
Yeah, I like keeping local, and I'm in a couple other places on the Cape and South Coast.
Yeah, I saw that. You just picked up a new gallery on Cape Cod. Well, you did grow up on Cape Cod, so.
I did, and it's funny, but where it is, it's in not Centerville, it's Osterville. I always get confused. Centerville's much easier to get to than Osterville. Osterville's like way the freak out there. You gotta go. a distance to get there. But it's a really cute area. I need to find maybe one more, a little further down Cape where I actually grew up, but getting there. It's a work in progress. But it's nice to sell work on the Cape and have, like, you know, family or friends that are like, oh, wow, I didn't really know I found this today. That's always nice. Versus the alternative of them calling me and be like, hey, wait, do you have any of this or any of that? And because my website, unfortunately, is not always up to date, because I've got people like Anthony who are like, wait, I need more pots. I need more pots. So I'm like, all right, well, all right, I guess so. I'll give you more.
Yeah, so there are a few different places where people can find your work. A couple galleries, at your studio, at your own, on your own website.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what the summer brings in terms of gallery sales and like what moves, where it moves, who is visiting what areas, which will be interesting, but we'll see. It's all a big summer of we'll see. And I know personally, I was supposed to be in 2 craft shows that have both been canceled at this point. One was in New Jersey for the end of September, which has already been canceled and turned virtual. And then Marion Art in the Park, that was also, I was also supposed to participate in it, and they are still having it. I at this time don't feel comfortable like being out in such a public place where then there's all of the issues of sanitation and having each piece sanitized after people touch it. And I mean, part of my work is having the ability, like being able to touch it, because it's a very tactile experience. It's a smooth surface and I want you to touch the pieces. But that's where this whole sanitizing and touching, not touching, being in areas where there's germs, it's just too much for me right now. So I opted out. But that's okay. There's next year where hopefully it'll be different.
Well, I think I know the drawing room has had a significant increase in online traffic. I don't know if you probably also follow your own online traffic.
Yeah.
But things have certainly changed for us, and we've been diligent or working diligently to get more of our collections up online. We currently have your work, what work is available to us on the online shop, and where Liz and I are always working on adding more collections to that. So our personal goal is to be up with 100% of our collections by October 1st. I said it out loud so somebody can hold. Yeah, so somebody can hold me accountable to it.
Don't worry, I'll get you on
I heard it. Everyone who listens,
Yeah.
first.
Heard it. I'll be waiting. But that's honestly, that's a realistic goal where I've also been trying to get myself to that point. And I mean, being a gallery where you have so much work and it's so diverse, and photographing all of that work, that's a whole nother game.
So you're going to be finishing up the saucer. These will get glazed and then fired again.
Yeah. So yeah, once they're done, I'll let them dry out and I'll hit them with a green scrubby. You might have been downstairs for this, but I sand over the surface to get the perfect smooth surface and a perfect curve on that, so there are no sharp edges. And then I fire it, then I take it out, glaze it, and then I fire it again. And then I sand it with a diamond pad sander. So it's got diamond grit on it, which cuts right through silica, which is what creates a little bit of the roughness on the surface. It's just silica that gets pushed out of the clay body during the firing. So then we make it nice and smooth and it's nice to touch.
So you will be nice enough to send us some photos of the completed pieces during your demo?
Oh, for sure. And I'm sure that a couple of these pieces will come to live here until somebody takes them to their new home.
Yeah, so someone can take them to their new home. That's great.
These pots, they travel. They like to meet new people.
Well, I've really enjoyed having you here, and despite our technical difficulties of not
I think it
being
worked
able
out.
to have you in your studio, I think it worked out really well.
Mhm.
And
I
Liz is
agree.
always helpful on the back end for us. So
Helpful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're finished on that guy. And ta-da!
Lovely.
Finished. All right. So that's all I have for you in terms of making and demoing. Do you have any other questions?
I don't have any questions. Let me just look in the comments to see if anybody else who's watching has questions. I think we answered most of them. We answered that the bowls are microwave and dishwasher safe. We talked about the made to order table settings as well as
anything I make is made to order too. You could order it with whatever shape, whatever color.
And in terms of your wall pieces, I know you're working on a commission now. Those are also available. The slugs. We need to come up with a better name for the slugs. I'm sure you.
I know. Well, I call the installations. They're like a different. I vary on the name, but it's often revolved around tides. It's like tidal pool or tidal wave. Different tide situations. Because for me, it's all about the ebb and flow of the ocean.
Yeah, I think this one you called tidal wave, and it's 10 by 10. So we're getting a weird reflection there. Sorry about that.
I know. That's the trouble with having the glass on there.
One of the things that makes things hard to photograph is the glass. So.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you very much.
How to photograph those.
Yeah. Do you have any questions or parting comments for us? No. Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for who took time out of their rainy afternoon to watch us. And hopefully we'll see you either at Hatch Street or in downtown New Bedford.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Anthe.
You're welcome. Thank you.